This story is called My Haunted House by Diddley Dingster, submitted on Reddit Paranormal. The house I lived in for these 3 years was relatively new, as the previous owner built it after his kids were born, and they're my age. I was actually friends with them, and I had stayed the night before moving there permanently, and they told me that the house was haunted, as an old woman was murdered on the property. I didn't pay much attention to this, as I thought they were just trying to scare me. I had no clue I would be moving into the same house a year later. All was well and we settled. The former owners had money and built a much bigger house outside of town. The first thing I need to explain is the layout of this house, as it is shaped very weird. Its main hallway that ran through the house was shaped like an L, with the front door, the living room, and kitchen being at the top of the L, and all the bedrooms and bathrooms being on the bottom. At the intersection on the L was my parents' room, and on the other side of the bottom part were both my sister's and I's room. Between the parents' room and the children's room is the main bathroom, which is important to note. The basement, an important location in the house, was accessed through the bottom part as well. The house itself was built very well, not cheap materials. Like I said, they had money. The only place left unfinished was the basement, and when I say unfinished, it simply did not have drywall on the ceiling. Everything else was walled, carpeted, and painted. It was basically finished. Now that the house is, I can finally tell you what happened, which was quite a bit. The first thing I remember happening to myself was when a door was slammed so hard on me, it shook the beam supporting it. For this moment, I was in my room, and it was my bedroom door that was slammed. I was reading a book, and I heard an audible sigh coming from near my closet. When I read, I get very focused and tune mostly everything out. So the sigh had to be very loud to get my attention the way that it did. It perplexed me, as I thought maybe the vents were switching on or something, when my door, maybe 6 feet to the left of my closet, slammed closed harder than I've ever seen a door slam before. The time between the sigh and the slam was maybe 2 to 3 seconds, and it left me in fear. After maybe a minute, I got enough courage to run out of my room and told my parents about it, and my father, a believer in paranormal things, checked it out and said it was fine for the time being. Father directly. For a period of time, my family had pet rats. Not the gross ones, but the really clean ones that cuddle with you and stuff. We've had them before and knew how to take care of them, so we had them. We had them in cages which have doors that need to be pushed in for them to shut, and pulled quite a bit for them to open. The metal goes into itself and whatnot. So my job as the eldest was to feed and water them before bed, which wasn't an issue since they were in the basement, and I spent most of my time there since that's where my Xbox was. One morning, I woke up to my father standing at my door, asking if I'd let the rat cages open overnight. My father worked around the graveyard shift, so he would return from work when I got up to go to school, and he was my alarm clock since he drove me to school as well. I told him that no, I didn't leave the cage open, and he said that they were open when he went down to the basement to put his vest away. He said to double check next time I'm downstairs doing my chores before bed, and I told him that I would. Go forward about a week, and I'm again feeding and watering the rats, and double checking the cages to make sure that they are closed and in place properly. Again in the morning, my father is standing there at my door again, and asking if I closed them, and I told him I double checked. This continued on for about 3 days before my father pulled out some small, maybe 6-inch bungee cords to hold the door shut. Since the cages are made out of wire bars, they easily hooked onto the cage and held the door firmly shut. Fast forward the next morning, and me and my father go downstairs to see if the cages are closed, and instead we saw the bungees are on the ground with the doors open. My dad grew pissed since our pets were in danger. My family also had multiple cats as well, so we didn't really want the rats to get eaten. And he found an old padlock to the cage shut. Luckily, the cage stayed shut after the padlock was added, but the fact that something took the bungees, tightly pulled bungees off the cage, still freaks you out to this day. So yesterday, I posted part 1 of my stories from my time living in a presumably haunted house. The link to that can be found here. I just want to tell the rest of what happened at the house, so here's a bit more of my experiences. Period of time in that house, I would hear my own name being called by a voice that sounded like my mother. The voice always originated from the top of the stairs, and if you read part 1, quite a few things happened at the top of those stairs. The frequency of these voices calling my name was fairly often, and maybe once or twice every 2 weeks. It sounded so much like my mother's voice that oftentimes I would respond to it with a, "Yeah?" Seeing as how I thought she was calling my name and needed something, many times this would be late at night, maybe around 2 a.m, when I was playing Xbox or something, and I would hear my name being called out. The voice, while it sounded like my mother's, it felt very far away, almost like she was in the kitchen calling my name. The reason I say this is because when my mother always called my name from the top of the stairs, it was loud and her voice carried. The voice also felt very soft. If that can be imagined, like it was being carried to me instead of being spoken directly at me. A couple times I would respond in my casual way of, "Yeah?" or "What?" and sometimes I would actually get up and see what she needed. The issue is that she more often than not would be sleeping in bed, and if I woke her to see what she needed, she would get angry and tell me she was asleep the whole time. This also didn't only happen during the night, and a couple of other weirder times during the day in the summer, the time you would least expect something paranormal. It would be around 1 p.m. and both my mother and father would be at work, and I would be in the basement playing my games, when I would hear my name being called from the top of the stairs. These ones I wouldn't answer as I knew my mother wasn't home. These midday ones, looking back on it, scared me the most, since I knew she wasn't home, and I wasn't hearing things. I only lived in that house for 3 years, and once I moved to a new house, I never heard those voices calling my name throughout the day ever again. The last thing that directly happened to me in that house included my mother, and happened when the entire family was in the room. The basement was very large and split in two, with one half being my sister's toy room and the other half being my entertainment center. My mother would often freak out at my sister due to the state of her toy room and would scream at her to clean it up, to which my sister would not. One of these days, my mother had the whole family help clean up the toy part of the room, and my mother was putting some stuffed animals in a bin, while myself, my father, and my sister were cleaning some other part of the room. There was also a large pile of stuffed animals on the floor that my mother was transferring to a plastic bin that had one of those talking animals in it. It said some things like, "I love you," or "You're my best friend," stuff like that. My mother had just grabbed the toy on top of this animal when both myself and her heard it audibly say, "I hate you." My mother stopped dead in her tracks and asked us if we heard it too, which I said I did, but my father and sister did not. My mother sat there trying to get it to replicate what it said, but it only say those common happy lines, not the mean one it had just spoke. So my mother, far more skeptical than me or my father, shoved the toy into the bin and continued on with their day. This moment with my mother was only the first issue with this talking toy. I would oftentimes be in the basement and only have the entertainment center area lights on, so the back of the room was dark but not pitch black. I would be in the basement playing games late at night when that same toy would say something inaudible through the bin out of nowhere. This toy wasn't programmed to randomly talk. It needed to be squeezed or have some kind of sensory input to trigger it. This would happen very infrequently, so whenever it did happen, it scared the shit out of me, and sometimes it wouldn't stop talking when it started. And when I went to get up to see what was wrong with it, it would then go silent. So this is a follow-up from 2 other posts that I made a few days ago. Those were about my experiences with my presumably haunted house growing up. Part 1 and Part 2 can be found here, respectively. I said in both of these posts that I would talk to my father about some of his experiences while working the graveyard shift as a police officer. He has 2 that he told me. It's kind of foreboding. The area itself used to be tied to an old church which burned down right before we arrived in town. The church, before burning down, was supposedly tied to satanic rituals, which many believe to have led to paranormal activity there. Consequently, the graveyard is very popular for teenagers to go out at night and get drunk at, and I'm guilty of this myself, although I did not see anything while I was there. My father, being a cop, was in the neighborhood and was checking out the cemetery to see if there was any kids running around or drinking. He pulled up to the side of the road and shined his light into the graveyard. He didn't see anything until he passed over the really old graves. He saw, as he says, a girl in a dress standing alone. It appeared so suddenly for him that he passed his light beyond her, and by the time he refocused where his light was pointing, she was gone. He then got out of his squad car and spent a moment calling out and seeing if anybody was there. As the cemetery has a reputation for being haunted, he didn't spend too long looking and left it at that. Jacquard and Dry graveyard apparition, the next one takes the cake in comparison. In the town we live in, there is a relatively new store that deals in lighting fixtures and other electrical items. Very much a home refurbishment store. Across the street from the store is an old, but still in use, gravel quarry. The land that both these things exist on were owned by the same man, whose name I do not know. The owner died maybe 10 years back and was very much a Scrooge. He wanted to be buried on his land, which helped him make all of his money. Thus he was buried behind the store, and this is where my father's next story happens. He received a call from dispatch that the alarms at the store had gone off, and he went to investigate. Our town is very small, so cops don't have partners, they're on their own. He arrives at the store, and sure enough, the alarm is going off. He opens up the building, which the doors to were locked, and went inside to find that the lights upstairs in the manager's office were on. He went upstairs to see who was there, and found that no one was in the room. The manager's room was very small, maybe measuring 20 feet by 20 feet, and only had filing cabinets, desks, and shelves in it. Nowhere for anyone to hide. My father looked around and unsurprisingly found no one on the premises. He turned off the alarm, turned off the lights, and locked the building. As he was about to radio it in, the alarm started going off again, so he unlocked the doors and ran inside. He heard footsteps this time coming from the manager's room, but all the lights were off. He turned them on and ran inside to look. No one was in the room, and there was only one entrance to this room, and you had to go up a metal staircase to get it. My father again searched the building and found no one, locked it up and left. A couple hours later, he heard another radio in from dispatch saying that the alarm was going off again, but this time another dispatch picked it up and handled it. Apparently this wasn't the first time it's happened either, and multiple officers in the area reported hearing footsteps and noises from that building at night, no one finding anyone inside. Those are my father's two stories. Let me know how you like them. Thanks for reading. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment if you enjoyed the video. And also remember to be alert and be safe, because you never know who's watching.